It's a great pleasure, Mr. Kemp. Thank you for friendship, and thank you for giving me a home in Atlantic Council during over a decade. I've enjoyed it much, and it's an honor and a pleasure. Let me first pay tribute to the American people, American administrations, and Congress of the United States, and particularly the American taxpayer, for the sacrifices in blood and treasure. A grateful nation, a grateful government, and a grateful president honor this partnership. But my particular tribute is to the 2,448 American men and women in uniform who paid the ultimate sacrifice, 95 of them since I've been president, and the new phase of our relationship under the bilateral security agreement is begun. I would like to thank more than 1 million veterans of Afghanistan and tens of thousands of civilians who did not consider the hardship post, but volunteered to serve in Afghanistan. So let me say what a pleasure it is to be able to speak to you. I was asked as to what my vision was. My vision is to enable my fellow Afghan women and men to enjoy the conditions to articulate and implement medium and long-term visions of a common future. The reason I'm framing it in that way is that the level of turbulence and resulting uncertainty makes the application of vision, like 2020 exercises, very difficult. So 5 key interrelated objectives will provide the foundation for that vision. First, to overcome the turbulences of the past, of the recent past, that have made uncertainty the dominant condition of our present. Second, to reclaim our historic function as an Asian roundabout and a hub of regional connectivity. 3, to build robust tools of governance to deal with the corona effect on the human security and the critical tasks of peace building, market building, state building, and nation building in a constantly changing context. 4, to create an economic and fiscal basis for self-reliance through the utilization of our immense natural capital and in assets and capabilities in order to expand opportunities for our men and women and to launch our boys and girls on the path of prosperity. And 5th, to adopt and practice a posture of multi-alignment in our foreign policy, pursuing a number of friendly relations with other countries while eschewing alliances and expanding the tools of partnership.
Well, Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We're very grateful. Again, we were wondering whether the tragedy of the COVID-19 pandemic provides an opportunity, since the Taliban as well as non-Taliban controlled areas are suffering from this disease. Is this an opportunity to accelerate reduction in violence and maybe have almost a de facto ceasefire as the government and Taliban work together to deal with the COVID-19 crisis?
First, one issue needs to be highlighted. The members of the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces that have been imprisoned by the Taliban are not completely released. It's important that the commitment, because this is a mutual commitment, is fulfilled. They claimed 1,000. The number keeps shifting, but we need clarity regarding the the fate of those that are with them and assurance that the last person remaining with them is released. The humanitarian situation requires joint action. COVID is a hyper event. The world before and after COVID are not going to be the same. Everybody is hit. We are now gone. We envisioned 5 phases: awareness, diffusion, adversity, relief, and recovery. We know the phases, but not the duration, because each country. We are now in the phase of adversity. But the economic consequence of this means that about 88 to 90% of the Afghan population requires food assistance and medical attention. A humanitarian ceasefire is urgent to enable us to provide services to every Afghan.
Thank you. One last question for me, and then we're going to go from some questions to our audience. And my last question is this. There have been press reports here in the United States that President Trump is considering further drawdowns of U.S. troop levels in Afghanistan before the end of the year. What impact would such drawdowns have on the prospects for peace and on the security situation in Afghanistan?
Well, first, this is the sovereign decision of the United States. I've always indicated that the sacrifice in blood and treasure is immense, and we appreciate the partnership regardless of the decisions that are made. Scenarios are always discussed, so one has to understand that this is not the first time that those scenarios are being discussed. Yesterday, General McKenzie, the head of CENTCOM, said the conditions were not right. The key framework is a condition-based approach. So what would be important is to have a dispassionate sense of those conditions. Our imperative now is to conclude peace as soon as feasible, but a sustainable peace. I think that again will be an important issue. Second, the Afghan security forces have not been defeated. They are committed to the nation and to the democratic order. God forbid, if violence resumes, we'll be able to defend ourselves, but our commando forces that I managed to double, and special forces and Air Force that we managed to triple, are key pillars of survival and ensuring constitutional order. But we hope that a condition-based approach would be explored.
Senator Ayat.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's good to have you with us. I wanted to ask, 5 years ago, you visited Washington, and I had the honor of attending your very eloquent address to a joint session of Congress. I wondered, if you visited Washington today, what arguments would you make to an increasingly skeptical Congress about having the U.S. Stay engaged and involved in Afghanistan?
Well, thank you, Senator. It's an honor to interact with you, and thank you for serving on the congressionally mandated Afghanistan Task Force. I look very much forward to benefiting from your wisdom and judgment. Whenever I have asked a high-ranking member of the security or defense or intelligence in the United States as to where Afghanistan fits in terms of national interest, the answer comes Homeland Security. I'd like to pay tribute to my good friend, General Petraeus, that now I see being present. The argument is on the following lines. First, is engagement in Afghanistan been positive in terms of homeland security or not? Two, the reduction in the number of troops. General Petraeus commanded over 130,000 troops and over 650,000 contractors. 8,500 in comparison to that, plus counterterrorism. Three, what is the threat of terrorism? Is that threat eliminated or is that threat present? We do not ask help for Afghanistan. What I would be asking Congress is how it perceives its interest and how Afghanistan fits within those interests. You have no obligation to us. You fulfill your moral obligation, both in blood and treasure. And as I pay tribute, always I pay tribute to the fallen heroes of the US forces. This is a partnership that has to have mutual interest and mutual respect. We are going to do everything to make sure that we can pay for our security, and we will do everything to reduce the turmoil, particularly the war, so that the relationship is mutually beneficial. The last point is, now this is a time-bound and condition-based schedule, and I think the goal of the American people can be achieved.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd now like to turn to General David Petraeus, who's chairman of KKR Global Institute, and as you well know, a former commander of U.S. and allied forces in Afghanistan. General Petraeus.
Thanks, Steve, and great to see you, Mr. President. And I have expressed public concerns about the agreement between the U.S. and the Taliban. And I've noted as well, though, that no one wants peace more than those that have actually been engaged in the fighting. We're now down to somewhere close to 8,600 U.S. forces and a few thousand coalition forces. I have argued for a sustainable commitment, which would seem as if that would be roughly that number. But if indeed the conditions are met and the casualties you mentioned are not that encouraging, candidly, in terms of meeting the conditions, but if, say, somehow we reach the conditions and the U.S. were to withdraw the number of forces below 8,600, perhaps all of them, what U.S. assurances, funding levels, military capabilities, and so forth would you want in such a case? Thank you.
Well, thank you, John Petraeus. And again, a tribute to your leadership. You are among the most knowledgeable people globally on the threats that face the United States. In appreciation of those threats, jointly will be extremely important to moving forward. We should acknowledge this and continue to have a strategic dialogue on the nature of threats and how we contend. The threat of terrorism from Al-Qaeda, from Daesh, and from other groups is not going to end with peace with Taliban. So one of the most important parts of the agreement with the Taliban should be, one, understanding a gradual reduction of forces, and second, a framework agreement for cooperating against counterterrorism and counter-narcotics. Without these two, the large support coalition for implementing the peace that we envision would be put at risk. Should the decision be made, and as I said, it's a sovereign decision, and we appreciate the decision-making process, support for the Afghan security and defense forces to the level that would enable us to continue reforms. And as you know, I was able to implement some very significant reforms in our security forces.
So one question we have from a student at Georgetown School of Foreign Service is if the United States continues further withdrawals, will you see Russia or China in some way filling the void, and not necessarily on the military side, but another question, do you see them, what role do you see for them economically? For example, would Afghanistan join the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as part of the Belt and Road Initiative? What do you see for the role of Russia and China as this situation plays out going forward?
China is our neighbor. We have a short border, but we are neighbors. And with Russia, we have a long history, part of it tragic, part of it very constructive. The core idea of multi-alignment is to increase with the members of the coalition for peace and prosperity and stability in Afghanistan. Neither power is interested in getting engaged in Afghanistan militarily. I think I'm fairly confident about this. My request from all our colleagues is to please take us off as a space of rivalry in big power plays. Belt and Road is not a grant initiative, it's loans. Afghanistan cannot take loans. We can only take grants. Peace is going to require courage, compassion, and commitment. And I'm sure that those are commodities that are not in shortage in this immense country. My biggest desire is to be able to retire to my village where my family has been for 600 years and write my books. I'm looking forward to an Afghanistan where I'll be able to teach again and learn continuously. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.